Welcome to the Week 10 Sentinel High School football recap. I'm Perry Mattern alongside Jake Adams. We finish off the regular season. District playoffs up next. And to finish off this regular season, a lot of blowouts.
Yeah.
Had a couple of close games. We'll get to those. Let's start out in Chambersburg, and there was a blowout there. Cumberland Valley was in town and had zero problems.
I mean, no surprise there. Nice news there. Jacob Hunt throws for 150 yards on the day. First time he's broken the century mark, I believe, all season. So they're obviously going to be riding defense going into the playoffs, and no surprise with the performance they put up.
Mechanicsburg gets their first Keystone win of the season. They beat Hershey on the road without Tyler Schubert.
Yeah, Keenan Huss didn't have too bad of a day starting his first start of the season. 6 for 16, did throw a pick, but 89 yards, and he didn't lose the game. That was the key there. They obviously have the weapons out there to kind of carry him with Shaheem Brown, and the defense did a good job against Hershey.
Paul Myra at West Perry, and the Mustangs just came so close to that first win. Really was a very good ball game.
They were leading in the first quarter. They were leading for the second quarter, and it just kind of fell apart a little bit. Jacob Owens with a 92-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. Didn't go their way again.
Middletown at Camp Hill, and the Lions roll up the points.
Yeah.
This team looks really good heading into the District 3 Single A playoffs.
Schuster played most of that game, surprisingly had a 16-yard run in the fourth quarter. 15 for 20, a nice efficient number. The thing I'm watching for, how this run defense goes up against, and we'll talk about this in the preview video later this week, against whoever their opponent is going to be, because they've had some struggles there.
Milton Hershey at Trinity, and the Shamrocks, they just couldn't stop the run.
No, they needed this win to have any shot at getting into the 2A tournament, and they couldn't make it. Just nothing really seemed to go their way. Kind of just tough to watch the way the season unfolded at the end for them, especially with what they had going for them at home.
East Pennsboro playing host to Northern. The Panthers, a bit of an uninspired start, but they rebounded and were able to score a lot of points.
they got Kyron Dennis scoring. They had Dakota Snedeker, Eric Trossel, David Stepanian, you name it. Someone got the ball in the end zone.
Big Spring at Waynesboro. And speaking of blowouts, this was not fair. In Waynesboro, how good is this team? I mean, this isn't one of our coverage teams, but they roll it up on Big Spring here, and they are end the season on a big winning streak.
Yeah, they scored 4 touchdowns in the last 2 quarters. It didn't stop, and that's kind of surprising too, because Big Spring's defense has been their one high point this season, and it just seemed like it gave out on them last night.
Right, really has been a frustrating season, and it had to be tough for them to finish the year like this. Greencastle at Shippensburg. This was the only game that we both picked incorrectly. We both had Greencastle and Shippensburg. Where was this offense all season long?
Cody Gustafson had 162 yards receiving, didn't have a touchdown, but I mean, where was this offense? They put up 300-something yards through the air. They got a whole bunch of points. I don't think they've scored this many points in some 4-game stretch of games at all.
Right. Greencastle, not a bad defense either. And we'll talk
they were in the hunt for districts for a while.
Yes,
too.
They were. We'll talk about Cody Gustafson's brother later in our Sentinel Stars. Susquehanna at Upper Dauphin, and just like West Perry, our other winless team, came so very close.
Leading there 4 minutes into the game, Shane Smith with a nice run. He ended up with 228 yards passing. First time they actually got some offense. They actually outgained Upper Dauphin. For the first time, I think, all year they outgained the opponent. And it was too little too late. They scored 14 in a comeback attempt in the fourth quarter, but just couldn't get it enough.
On to our 3 key games, Boiling Springs at Steel High. And we were pretty sure the Bubblers were in, but they solidified themselves with a nice road win to head into this 2A tournament where they're going to be tested right away.
Yeah, and they almost ended up hurting Camp Hill in a way, because Steel High, if they could have dropped down to the 4 spot where the Lions will face. But thankfully, I think they're kind of grateful that didn't happen, because they lost to Steel High earlier in the year. John Vaughn, again, just kind of did his thing, a couple yards, nothing flashy, good steady 4 or 5 yards per carry. Dalton Showicker, 5 for 10, 60 yards, very efficient, but it was the defense that I think kind of carried them. They held Jockey Bauman and Shaheem Moody Williams in check, which is about as much as you can ask for.
Right, no doubt about it. Harrisburg at Carlisle, and you were on hand to watch this one. What an inspiring night for the Thundering Herd. They're back in the district playoffs, and with in a big way.
Yeah, this was an emotional game, to say the least. It was very chippy. It was very aggressive. It was very, hands to the throat kind of game for both sides. The difference, I think, was Harrisburg lost Mikhail Clark early. It looked like he went out with an injury, but we didn't really see anything on the field. It was all of a sudden their backup was in, and you didn't know what was going on. And once that happened, the offense stalled. Carlisle switched to an amoeba front, really caused havoc with the offensive line for Harrisburg. Forced a lot of pressure too on their young quarterback there, and got in the backfield a lot for big stops. And it just, the defense, I think, really, it was surprising how well they played. I mean, we know they're good, but it carried that team tonight.
Shutout good with Harrisburg, and that's I mean, that is something that is it's good to hear for the Herd, because they're going to get one of the best teams in the state next week. Likely they're going to get Wilson.
And that's just, with the way that this team is, the one question I have with them is the amount of penalties they have. They've got to be the most penalized team in our area. Again, they had 12 or 13 last night, and that's not going to cut it. Because, there are some penalized teams in districts, but the farther you get in, the more disciplined these teams are, the more been there, done that they are. And Carlisle's, while their energy and their attitude is great because they're a very feisty team, it can also be their undoing. And if it wasn't for knocking out their Harrisburg's quarterback early, I think that might have actually done it. But once the snowball kind of got rolling, Carlisle was able to get away with it.
Speaking of chippy games, aggressive games, Cedar Cliff and Redland, this was a big game as to why Jake has the shirt on this week, because he had the Patriots, I had the Colts, and I picked Cedar Cliff, and I was right, but I would have never been able to tell you that they were going to win by 29.
Yeah, I really honestly thought, with the way that defense has been so up and down, that Overton might just kind of get things going with what he did against McDevitt last week, and just to kind of continue that momentum. I know he's tired and he plays both sides of the ball, but you thought, my thinking there was, if anyone's going to carry this team against a hated rival, it's going to be Overton. And it just didn't seem to work out that way.
Cedar Cliff did an outstanding job. I mean, Redland uses a lot of the speed run stuff from a slot receiver coming across the formation, and then Garrett Scott as well. Garrett Scott was really the big problem last week for McDevitt, because Overton was breaking off a couple of big runs, but Scott was the consistent runner, and Scott had no room whatsoever. And Overton was got his a little bit later, scored a couple of touchdowns, but Cedar Cliff, a very good game plan, and if they can game plan like that in the playoffs. This team offensively, they are just so balanced. They are, I mean, Demi goes for 154 and Brenneman throws for 275. If you can do, I mean, they're not going to be able to do that against everybody, but still, if it's 100 and 200 every game, you got to believe they have a chance.
You can count on one hand how many games Demi has had with less than 2 touchdowns. I mean, it seems like he's in the end zone every quarter, basically. I think he's approaching 30 on the ground. He's got 1 or 2 through the air as well. Brenneman has just, I mean, that's remarkable what he's done as a sophomore in this offense with the Andrew Ford pressure that he had coming in. Obviously, like, there's so much on this kid's shoulders, but it's got to help having Demi, and that line, too, has just been outstanding.
They played an outstanding game last night, and it certainly will help in their momentum heading towards the playoffs. All right, let's go to our 3 Sentinel stars. Let's start with Grant Brenneman. 275 yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks. And I thought what Cedar Cliff did really well is, first of all, they set up the run for him, and then he makes smart, easy throws. He does not try to make the big play.
And the one thing I love about him, too, is he was a scrambler for the first couple games, and he still very much uses his legs. But you can tell now, I saw it midway through the year, and I'm sure it was probably the same last night, he extends plays. He doesn't really look to run. He's always looking downfield, and it's just to try and get out of the pocket. Michael Schuster does it really well. Billy Berger does this really well, where it's these top quarterbacks in this area, they like to just get out to the right or left or back up just a little bit, just to get the defensive line away from them and find someone else open.
Tyler Gustafson in Shippensburg found his brother for 162, but Tyler was over 300 yards.
330 yards he had through the air, 19 for 28. Who would have seen this coming? He had 1 rushing touchdown. He had, 1, 2, 3, I believe, passing TDs. I mean, he basically almost equaled his season totals in 1 game, it looked like.
Very frustrating at the same time, because you really wonder where this Greyhounds offense was all season long.
And where that Greencastle defense was, too. I mean, they've been pretty solid all year, and then they just get burned like that in a game that they kind of needed, too.
Billy Berger, our final Sentinel star, he leads Carlisle back into the District 3 Quad A playoffs, and Billy is well known for his arm and his quarterbacking abilities. But it was his defense that really turned the tide of this game.
Yeah, and it wasn't necessarily like he made a fantastic play on defense, not to take any credit away from him, but it was a pass that bounced off receiver's chest on a simple slant route, bounced right into his arms. All he had to do was just secure it, and it was 13 yards to daylight. Offensively, you could just see the bravado that this kid has. He made a throw that made it 13-0 to his favorite receiver, Deontay Ramsey, where the corner was blanketing him. It was a simple slant route from 11 yards out. The safety's running down, and I asked him afterwards, like, didn't you see the safety coming? Like, that's a dangerous throw to make, because he cleared the guy's fingertips by maybe 3 inches. And he said, I was getting pressure, and I just got to get rid of it, and I trust Deontay to make the catch. And that's what it was all night. He threw up some shots that just, it was surprising they didn't get picked off, but he has the utmost confidence in his weapons. Mike Woosner, Deontay, Deshaun Millington, all those guys, he's willing to throw it up, and it doesn't care if he's falling on his back when he does it.
Well, they're going to need some more big plays to keep this season alive, but you never know.
No.
That's why you play the games. And we will talk about those district playoff games. We have 7 district playoff teams in all, and we will preview each of their games. We actually may have a couple of our teams playing each other.
Yes.
But when those pairings are finalized, you can find that out on cumberlink.com/sports. We'll have that up there, and you can follow Jake and I on Twitter as well. Our preview video will come out on Thursday night. We'll talk to you then.